Shako, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And I was thinking where to start this one, and I want to go way back before the world-class communication expert that sat in front of me just now, and I want to ask, what role did Robert Greene's books play in the man that I get to talk to today?
Hugely, man. I'm glad you asked, because the 48 Laws of Power was my introduction to communication skills, because it's the type of book that feels like hidden knowledge. What I mean by that is, the way that I found it actually is a pretty funny story, because back in the days, I'm not ashamed to say, I had LimeWire, and I downloaded a list of books on LimeWire, literally when I had like my iPhone 3 or 4. And I remember going through these list of books in a waiting room while I was waiting for my mother at a hospital. Actually, it was all fine, nothing dramatic. And I saw this book. It was titled The 48 Laws of Power, but it didn't have a cover title. And I thought, okay, this is weird. It was just a PDF. I went through it, and I went through the chapters, and I realized that these chapters are teaching you how to handle with power dynamics, how to deal with different individuals and manage social dynamics. And I don't know what it is, but that triggered a pure obsession on human nature, on social dynamics for me. So that was while I was at university with social anxiety. So when I realized that there's this information, which is it's a gold mine for me, I became obsessed and so curious as to why everybody wasn't studying communication and social dynamics as much as they could. Because if I can improve my communication skills, if I can improve my status, my social status, which is something everybody craves, by the way, no matter who you are, everybody craves status. If you can do that consciously, why the hell wouldn't you? So that's the role that Robert Greene had. It kick-started my obsession in social dynamics. I was already interested in it, but in the dating world, in it was pretty much it was the pickup scene, because that's when I was learning how to be confident speaking to women and work on my self-esteem. But the problem with that is you focus too much on women.
It's the canned openers, and it's the rehearsed
the names
lines.
And this and that. Exactly. It became too canned. It became too robotic, to the point where even if, as a man, you learn how to approach a woman and attract her in the first few minutes, after the first date, she sees right through you, especially women.
Of course, you put forward a facade or a persona, which has created attraction, but then when the real you comes through, the authenticity comes through, and the attraction fades, that would probably feel worse for the guy than if he'd just been himself from the start and been rejected at the start.
Exactly. And the rejection is a beautiful thing, because you're just figuring out who's meant to be in your life and who isn't. So people tend to, especially in the early stages of the pickup order, I do believe that a lot of them would try to avoid negative emotions too much. For example, this is how to avoid rejection, or this is how to avoid feeling insecure and this and that, which logically makes sense. But I've noticed after the pickup world, when I went into the world of personal development and communication, I realized that a much better approach was a holistic approach, meaning integrate your emotions. If you're feeling insecure when you go on a first date, that's speaking to you. That's saying something to you. It's shining light on an area of your life that you need to pay a little bit more attention to, right?
Absolutely. I'm always interested what the pebble at the top of an avalanche is for an expert like yourself, and for that pebble to be Robert Greene's work, it's really interesting to see how it's gone on to influence you in this way.
Yeah, I would say it was Robert Greene's work, and also getting into sales for the first time, because as a socially awkward, shy introvert growing up, doing door-to-door sales or even telecommunication was just so uncomfortable for me. But the thing that pebble specifically, Robert Greene was the introduction, but the pebble that turned into a huge snowball was actually my first experience in sales, when I realized I could influence somebody.
This simple product has revolutionized my skincare, and I bet you can't guess what it is. As a podcaster, I've tried lots of different skincares to make sure that I'm looking fresh and feeling great on camera. And this is No Tox Face Balm. It is simply 2 natural ingredients, raw honey and beef tallow, and it's enabled me to ensure that there's no toxins going into my body. My skin feels and looks great, and guess what? No Talks have a sale on right now, so hit the link and get involved.
That was wild to me. I was like, wait, I can make somebody like me just from the way that I'm communicating, just from my body language or my facial expressions, from the way that I'm listening to them. I can actually influence them and get them to give me money or get them to make a life-changing decision or donate to an amazing cause or whatever it may be. That was the pebble, because after that, I just had blood in my eyes like a shark, man. I'm like, I want to learn as much as possible about this and see how far I can take it. See how interesting of a friend circle can I make? How beautiful of a woman can I attract? And I have my wife behind the camera there. And how big can I grow my business? Things like this. And I realized the key for all of those areas of success, dating, social life, business, all relationships, sales, career, the key was communication skills, even in my career before.
It's foundational. I completely agree with you.
Absolutely.
And I've seen that from my own background as well. I had that early experience of getting into sales and just loving the fact that, as somebody who wasn't confident before that, could go into an environment and find out somebody's problem, bridge the gap with the solution we're putting forward, face the rejection, make the pitch, see if it would happen. And I love that part of your story was that almost proof of concept moment.
Yeah.
And so many of the business owners I've interviewed over the last 4 or 5 years now, they tell me about that early moment when it's not always a light bulb clicking on, but there's something that twigs in the brain and says, I can do this. It's a proof of concept. This idea works. This thing that I've been thinking about actually works in reality. And then from there, the people that end up with the expertise that you have, they just push on and on and on and on and get better and better and better.
And it's your area of curiosity. You find an area, a subject that you are passionately curious about, and you roll with it. That's how you end up not working a day in your life, as the cliche goes. You do that by finding something that you're genuinely curious about. Albert Einstein said that. He said, I'm not a genius, I'm just passionately curious. If you're that, he was actually a genius, so he was being humble, but if you're genuinely curious about a subject, you end up radiating a certain passion and enthusiasm for it, right? I was at a workshop last week, and it was a group of fitness coaches, actually. I'm not a fitness coach, but I'm thinking of hiring a fitness coach. There were these different presenters, and one of them stood out to me. He didn't even have the best presentation, but what I liked most about him was the fact that when he would talk about transforming people's lives and body transformations, as he would put it, I was like, wow, this guy's really invested in body transformations, and he's really passionate about it. And that made me follow him on Instagram. And I know down the line, he's the kind of guy that I'm going to hire.
And it was energy that attracted you to him, and it was the delivery of his content, not just the content itself.
Absolutely. It's in the delivery. A good example for this, Colin, is imagine two people are going for a job interview, and there's person A and person B. Person A has maybe 5 to 10% more skill and experience than person B, but during the interview, person A is very bland, doesn't make eye contact, maybe fidgets a lot, doesn't ask any good questions, and just presents themselves, and that's it. Person B, with less experience and less skill, is charismatic, is smiling, is enthusiastic, has great body language, asks curious questions that are out of the ordinary for the interviewers. Who do you think is going to have a better chance of getting the job? It's always going to be person B, because person B is more reliable. When you have good communication skills, it makes you reliable. People say, yeah, he or she can get the job done.
And I think there's a real confidence that that person will have the behaviours that will lead to them becoming and closing that 5% gap in skill very quickly. So you can hire the aptitude rather than the ability immediately.
Exactly.
I really, really like that. And I think I see that in sales a lot of the time when we've hired staff in the last 2 years. I would rather hire somebody, and it's typically younger. That's maybe a discriminatory point there. I'll get told off by that for the PC brigade in the UK. But
That's true. Yeah.
But hiring somebody younger, more moldable, who's enthusiastic, charismatic, willing to learn, whereas sometimes you hire somebody who's, I've worked in business development for 8 years now. I've got a lot of experience, but then if I look at their CV, they've had the same job for 8 years. They haven't got 8 years of experience. Whereas if you hire somebody who's maybe had 1 year's experience, but they're high energy, excitable, enthusiastic, that's the kind of person I want in my team.
Absolutely, brother. Can I give you an example of this?
Please.
I'll tell you why. I thought I was going to be late today because I was rushing to get a haircut. I was looking like a bit of a caveman, and I wanted to go.
We need you looking fresh, and you
Yeah,
are.
you're looking fresh. Thank you very much. I went to a local barber, which was literally 2 minutes from my house because I didn't want to go to my regular one because I didn't want to be really late. So I went to this new barber. I go into the shop, and this guy's literally lying down on the couch, and he looks at me confused. And I say, "Are you working here?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Are you open?" And he said, "Yes." No smile, nothing. He didn't even say hello to me. And I said, "Okay, can you fix me?" He said, yes, come sit down. We sit down, and he wipes his face, and he looks tired, and he grabs the thing to put on me, and he starts working. He doesn't even ask me what I want. I tell him, "Brother, just wait 1 second. Shave my head, please. Do this and that." And he goes, okay. And that's it. He gets started. The whole way through, doesn't ask me a single question. It doesn't look enthusiastic at all. And by the way, I understand some people sometimes have bad days. I get that. I'm not saying go be heartless. But if you have a job, take responsibility for your job. At the end, I asked him, I said, "How much was it?" He said, 100. I was like, okay, that's actually pretty cheap. The one that I regularly go to is 250 dirhams. Now, my original barber, whenever I go to, the first time I went to him, big smile on his face. "Where are you from, brother? Interesting. What do you want exactly?" He asked me 5 times during the haircut, "Is this good? You happy with that?" Okay, amazing. Just because it was my first time. At the end, he gave me his WhatsApp number. He said, "Let me know whenever you want a haircut. I'll book a spot for you." Even though he's more than double the price and he's further away, this guy's 20 minutes from my house compared to the first guy, I'm always going to go back to my original barber. Communication skills makes or breaks you. I'm one example for that first barber. How many people do you think he's dealing with every day?
His sales funnel's got holes in it all the way through.
Bro, he's leaving so much money on the table because of his lack of enthusiasm.
Do you know, I honestly think he probably is losing out on stimulating conversations and improving the quality of what he does too, both in terms of the quality of haircut he gives, but also the quality of the interaction he has, because we as humans, we're in a loneliness epidemic. I don't think Dubai is as lonely a city as many of the others that I've spent time in, but I think people are struggling for genuine connection. And while you shouldn't always become friends with your clients, every new person that sits down in that chair is an opportunity for him to make a connection that could vastly improve his life or change his life. It might be somebody that invests in him that says we're going to do 3 barber shops in the next year, or it could be any number of things. Or you could have given him advice about communication for free, which you charge a lot for. That is the missed opportunity of not having a level of openness and a level of willingness to put yourself out there.
I think people wait for the perfect opportunity to turn on their charisma. I think as a man, you can gauge another man's character based on how they communicate to everybody. Everybody. I was enthusiastic with this guy. I asked him, I said, "Where are you from, brother?" "Amazing. What's your name?" Cool. He didn't ask me for my name either, even when I asked him what his name is.
I think he is having a bad day, I hope.
Maybe, bro. I don't know. Maybe. But you know what? I don't think he was. I was telling my wife on the drive here, people are predictable, man. You can look somebody in the eye and tell after 10 seconds, if you have the eye for it, whether or not this guy is going to make it or not. I know that sounds harsh, but it's the reality, because humans are very, very predictable. You said you've been to other cities that are more lonely. Where have you been?
I think London's a lonely city because people move there for work for the first time, but then they have to put themselves outside their comfort zone to maybe join a run club or go to Pilates after work or go to a new gym. I think Dubai can be. I think Dubai can be lonely if you move here as an entrepreneur and you aren't willing to network. So if you don't have a social profile like yourself and you go to dinners, I've seen you went dinner with Charlie Johnson, who I know is huge in the networking space and online fitness as well. So you've made great connections. But I've had a friend that's moved to Dubai. I've had a friend that moved to London, and they can be quite insular cities if you don't put yourself out there. I think Dubai's got more opportunity though for connections than other places because more people are vibrating at the same frequency in terms of aspiration, abundance, encouraging of others, whereas some cities are scarcity minded. But in the UK, we're really struggling with that at the moment. Like, we had the second highest millionaire exits in the world last year, 9,500 people. But the first was China. But as a percentage of our population, it's obviously much more for the UK to lose 9,500. And some of the comments on like Instagram Reels, or Daniel Priestley did a post on it, and people were in the comments saying good, like get them out, F them. And you're thinking, this is a real problem. The tax base is being eroded. Like, who's going to pay your benefits, or who's going to pay for your council house if this keeps happening? And we have a scarcity issue, whereas I think in Dubai we have a very abundant atmosphere. And like, even my friend and I, Bryce, who's come to the studio today, we were training at TKMMA this morning, and two British guys came over and spoke to us because they heard the accents. One of them was like, oh, like, yeah, I'm into podcasts, I'd love to listen to your podcast. And I wasn't even leading with that. I was just like, oh yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And he was like, oh, what are you doing this afternoon? I was like, well, I'm recording a podcast.
That's pretty cool.
And you can share it, but people are more open to, I would say it's small talk, but it's like a level up from small talk.
Yeah. They have a low guard in Dubai. People are very open to speaking, because you're absolutely right. People come here for similar reasons. They come here for networking. They come here for the network. That was a big reason why we came here, to be honest. It was because I knew that the caliber of people that are here, caliber of entrepreneurs and professionals, is at a high level. And I didn't know that about London. That's very interesting, but I'm not that surprised, because I grew up in Sydney, and Sydney feels like that. You'd be surprised. I think if you go as a tour, have you been to Australia?
Never, no.
Okay. If you go to Sydney or Melbourne as a tourist, I think you'll have an amazing time because of the weather and the beaches and the nature. It's fantastic. But living there and growing up, people tend to, I don't know if it's similar in Glasgow actually, but in Sydney, people have tall poppy syndrome, where they're afraid to show that they're going after something. Even growing up, man, when I started my coaching business, which is my passion project, it's my life's work, I had some of my closest friends ask me very skeptically, how are you going to make money from that? Is that something that's going to work out? Like, do people actually pay for that? And these were my best friends. And meanwhile, when they tell me, hey, I'm going after this gig, or I'm going after this job, or I'm going after this goal, for me, maybe because I was in the personal development space, I get excited for them. I'm like, amazing, man. Like, you're going after it. Go for it. Environment is so important.
That's such a tough period when you're starting something. And one of the Australian guests that I've spoken to in the podcast, a guy from Melbourne called Johnny Starr. He's a fitness influencer, and we actually literally had a 10-minute segment talking about tall poppy syndrome, and he resonated so strongly because when he started his brand, when he started posting his physique and his training and his nutrition, his closest friends, the people that knew him most, were the least supportive, as you said.
It's crazy.
It was strangers online that were like, bro, you're killing it. I love seeing the fact that you get up at 4 a.m. and listen to an audiobook and you do your cardio in the Stairmaster, or, oh my goodness, it's so cool to see you building the logo for the brand, or tailoring the shorts in a particular way that makes you look more jacked. They were encouraging him, whereas, as you said, sometimes the people closest to you are the ones that I feel sometimes they're doing it from like a protecting you from risk perspective, but often they are also worried that you're shining a light on the fact that they're willing to sit and live life on autopilot while you're willing to maybe take a risk and do something different.
Absolutely. And that life on autopilot is terrifying. I can't imagine anything worse, to be honest, man. My biggest fear is staying the same, being the same person that I was last year. If I'm the same Shako in a year's time as I am today, I'd be very, very disappointed. To me, that's death. You're not moving, you're not growing. What happens in still waters? It becomes murky, it turns into a swamp. What happens when water's running? It turns into a creek. It's a spring, right? It's fresh. And that's with life. With life, you need to keep moving. In fact, I forgot the term for it actually. It's a good word. But humans, we're nomadic. We're nomadic, biologically, psychologically, we are nomadic creatures. Because tens of thousands of years ago, we used to live in tribes, right? Tribes of 50 to 100 people. And when we lived in tribes, we didn't stay in one location. We had to keep moving in order to hunt for food and scout for food as well. And because we were constantly moving, that kept us alive. That kept us fit. What do most people do these days? They stay stuck in the same position.
Sedentary lifestyle.
Man, I just couldn't stand, after graduating high school, going into university, having the same routine, living in the same house while I was staying with my parents, just day in, day out. I felt like I was dying, man. I felt brain fog. A lot of people experience brain fog and they don't even realize it, man.
Unawareness of the pain and just comfortably numb.
Comfortably numb. That's a really good way to put it. Autopilot is comfortable because they don't need to take responsibility for it. It's a lack of responsibility. It's hard to put in the work. If people say, when people tell me their goals, I rarely believe them. Because how often do you come across somebody, Colin, who says, I have these goals and that goals, and you can just see that they're obsessed. You mentioned the name Charlie Johnson. He's one of those few people where he's obsessed, bro. And you do need a shark-like energy to go after it. Otherwise, if you want greatness, that is. But anyway, I'm going down a bit of a tangent.
No, of course, but I really value that in the listener as well, because I always encourage people to take action on their goals and not always tell the world first. In fact, those that listen to lots of the podcast will laugh down their AirPods or through the car stereo just now, but I did 5 or 6 guest appearances during 2019, mostly talking about brain body business, how I functioned in my sales career and looked after my body, and travelled all around the UK. And I loved the format so much so that I kept threatening, I'm going to start a podcast. And every time I would share I was going to start a podcast, my Instagram followers, my likes, would people like, oh, that'd be amazing, you sound really good in a podcast, you're a good communicator, you can tell that you would do well at it. And that dopaminergic hit and that level of praise actually sedated me from doing the thing all the way until the first lockdown of 2020. So my first episode went out on the 1st of April 2020.
Why do you think that is?
Because it was enough for me to get the praise for people to tell me your podcast will be great, and I didn't have to do the work up until that point. When the time dynamic changed and you're locked inside for 10 weeks at the start, as it was in the UK, 10 weeks to flatten the curve or whatever nonsense it was, it gave me the time and the bandwidth to do it. And then I just relentlessly went, and we've not missed a single Sunday upload since then. This will be episode 300 and something. Wow. We've really been relentless. But sometimes when people speak their goals out loud, so I'm going to lose 2 dress sizes for my wedding, or I'm going to be shredded for Ibiza, or I'm going to start this coaching business, or I'm going to quit my 9-5. Sometimes the validation of people being like, that would be amazing. Sometimes it doesn't come from your closest friends, as we spoke about. Sometimes they tear you down. But many people online may hit the like button, and that can sedate us enough to not take the action that we need to.
Absolutely. Complacency is a trap at the end of the day. You need to consistently be setting new targets and new goals. And I think this is one of the best ways to grow as well. I had somebody ask me a few weeks ago, Shako, what's one of the most effective ways to build my self-confidence? I said, create and hit difficult goals. Create goals that scare you. And they can be little, but they can be large as well. Little, for example, if somebody is experiencing social anxiety, excuse me, if they're experiencing social anxiety, they're a bit nervous meeting people, start conversations with people at a cafe. Compliment somebody next time you get into an elevator. Be charming about it. That is going to increase your confidence over time. Then set bigger goals. Quit your job within 3 months. Start an online business. That's exactly what I did. I gave myself a 90-day deadline in my 9-to-5. I said, within 90 days, I'm going to get my first couple of clients, and I'm going to quit my job and coach full time. And when you do that, which I did, do you know how much confidence that gives you, man? It gives you so much confidence. Something that my clients do is 30-day meditation streaks. Every day for 30 days, you sit down and you meditate for at least 10 minutes. And at the end of that, the feedback is always, man, I am so confident now. I feel so calm and present. Not just because of the benefits of meditation, but because of the benefits of going through something that you say you're going to do. And that's, at the end of the day, what is that? When you say you're going to do something and you do it. That's integrity.
A man of your word.
You're a man of your word.
One of the biggest mental health challenges I think that we have is there's a big gap between people's idealized version of themselves and the reality. And that delta and that gap is pain. And there's action that's required to close that gap. So when you do as you say you were going to do, when you said you were going to do it, that feels so good. You reinforce the type of character that you have. And away from the podcast, I'm a sales director, but I've been doing sales coaching recently. And one of the big things I'll say to the guys is build an identity of the type of person you want to become, and then build the habits and routines that person must have. Any gap between those habits and routines and the person you want to become and what you actually do, that gap is delusion. Do not be delusional. I'm warning you, don't be delusional, because you'll be unhappy in that gap. And that's exactly what the guys that you're coaching to do, the 30-day streak, they're reinforcing their identity every single day. So at the end of the 30 days, they're like, I'm the kind of guy that follows through on his intentions. And that's a hell of a position to be in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And having your goals and being at point A and wanting to get to point B isn't just a matter of doing the work either. You have to create, as you said, the identity shift. And because if you're not feeling it, if you're not feeling like somebody that can make $1 million in a year, for example, or if you don't feel like somebody that's worthy of a beautiful relationship with a beautiful woman, you're not going to get it. You're not going to achieve it, no matter how hard you work, which is why people end up being burnt out. Burning out isn't from working too much. Burning out is from being misaligned. It's when being out of alignment. So I learned this from Joe Dispenza, actually. And I've noticed every time I do it, it freaking works. So if anybody wants to change their lives listening to this, set a goal. Here's step-by-step what to do from Joe Dispenza. Set a goal. For example, let's say make $1 million a month and give me another goal.
Have a six-pack.
Have a six-pack. Okay. So I want to make $1 million and I want to have a six-pack by the end of 2025. You write that down on a piece of paper. And then on the right-hand side, you write down the emotion that you're going to feel once you achieve the six-pack and the $1 million. Could be gratitude, could be confidence, it could be awe. So I'm experiencing gratitude, awe, and confidence. And let's say fulfillment as well. You sit down for 20 minutes, you get into a meditative state. By the way, he has guided meditations on this, you can do it. You sit down, and for about 10 minutes, you get into state, a meditative state. This is how to actually visualize properly, by the way, so it works. Once you're in a meditative state, you visualize yourself having that six-pack, making that $1 million in detail. How would your life be looking? What would you be wearing? How would you be smelling? What would your day-to-day look like? What would you be driving? Where would you be living? What would your friends look like? What would your clients look like? And as you're imagining that lifestyle, what would your gym routine look like? As you're imagining, literally looking in the mirror, you just made $1 million, you're feeling good, you just got out of the sauna. You want to replicate the emotions, which we can do as humans. We can think about something that happened last week and get angry, right? So why not think about something that hasn't happened yet?
You can future pace, not just think back.
Yeah. As Joe Dispenza says, you want to remember the future. So when you remember how amazing you felt in the future and you're feeling it now all of a sudden, not only are you making that $1 million and you have the six-pack, but you feel grateful. You're in awe of life, of God, of the universe, and you're confident and you're so fulfilled. Now that is reality. And your body does, and your brain doesn't know the difference between your imagination and reality. So when you open your eyes after that meditation, what do you think is going to happen? Every single action you have is going to align with that new state, that new energetic state that you're in. And you have to consciously, very, very consciously create that personality, that new identity. Otherwise, you're just going to keep doing the same thing.
So powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned that the guys that you're coaching spend 30 days meditating, which I guess enables a lot of these powerful things that you're discussing there as well. What are the most common problems they come to you with in terms of communication?
It's often feeling nervous in group settings. That's a very common one. A little bit of nervousness presenting as well, because a lot of my clients are executives and high-level CEOs. So they're in high-stake meetings, they're in conferences, things like this. And also a lack of assertiveness, where they're trying to be assertive, but it feels aggressive to them.
Can we spend some time on the group settings first, and what are some of the steps that they need to take to overcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally, I experienced this myself. I used to go through this. Excuse me. In a group setting, if you're getting nervous, it's because you're in your own head. It's because you're thinking about how you're being perceived. You're wondering about how I look. Are these people judging me? Do I seem cool? Do I seem weird? Am I dressed nice? Do I look okay? Me. It's just ego. It's purely ego. And everybody has ego, by the way. So the way to counteract that, the way to actually feel very calm and confident in a group setting, and anybody can achieve this, I'm telling you. I did it myself from having crippling social anxiety. Next time, if you're nervous in a group setting, focus on your breath. That's step one. Step two, focus on the people that you're with. Give people your full attention and your eye contact. Genuinely listen to what's happening. Step three, relax your physiology. If you're closed, open up. Relax your jaw. Relax your facial muscles. Relax your belly. If you just do these three things and you get out of your head and you have good body language, you'll start to feel way more confident, way more calm in group settings.
That's so powerful, and it's really actionable as well, because I think some people learn better by doing, some people learn better by seeing, some people learn better by feeling, some people learn better by the physical movement. So when I've spoken to somebody about public speaking before, I'll help them with pacing when they speak, and they use their hands to touch the number of points that they're making. Nice. And it slows them down, and that works for guys that are like kinesthetic learners. But then you're speaking there about very clear things that you can do that are actionable, that somebody can say, right, I'm feeling really nervous at this dinner party, or I'm about to speak at this presentation at work, and you're like, okay, but have you opened up? Have you taken a breath?
That's right.
They have a checklist.
Yeah.
And anyone that listens to a podcast like my one over the last few years knows that having actionable steps rather than return intellectual masturbation of, oh yeah, like I'm going to become more confident. You think, okay, but how? Oh, well, Shako said, do these three things and my nerves will dissipate a little bit and I'll become more myself and I'll be more able to have this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a matter of getting into state. What I just described, focusing on your breath, focusing on the people that you're with, etc., that is simply, those are steps to get into state. When you learn how to get into state, which is what you do in meditation, you become, state is basically being deeply present to the moment. When you do that, you don't need to prepare for a podcast. You don't even need to prepare for a speech, believe it or not. Because when you get into state, it's like you're switching something on. Deeply present, deeply grounded, and that allows you to be spontaneous. That allows you to be naturally charismatic. And people feel that you're authentic when you communicate like that as well.
Absolutely. Talk to me about assertiveness, because I think many of the people, as you say, a lot of your clients are executives, CEOs. Assertiveness is a fantastic quality to have, but one that many of us feel like we lack in.
Most people lack assertiveness because they believe that they're going to come across as aggressive, or they think that they're going to get into conflict. Are you going to get into conflict? That's a choice. Are you going to be attacking somebody? There's a difference between attacking somebody and being assertive, right? For example, if you say to me, you didn't, which I don't mind at all because I have nothing that I don't want to talk about anyway. But sometimes before a podcast, people ask me, Shako, is there anything that you don't want to talk about? And I always say, no, there isn't. Now, if I say, yes, there is actually, I would appreciate it if we didn't speak about politics, for example. That is technically an assertive statement. But is that conflict? Is that aggressive? It's just speaking for your needs.
I would describe it as you would give me a clear boundary.
Exactly. That's exactly what assertiveness is, by the way. You hit the nail on the head. Assertiveness is expressing your clear boundaries. People will treat you how you teach them to treat you. What you tolerate teaches people how to treat you. So if you don't have boundaries in place, people are going to step all over you. You're going to be taken advantage of through life.
I agree. I had this conversation at a mixed dinner party not too long ago, and I said, you teach people how to treat you. And some of the ladies that were with us at the table disagreed with that. And I was meaning about the dating dynamic as well. So they found this very, very challenging. I wonder what you think. I said if they have been particularly promiscuous in the past, then a lot of guys will view them through that lens and will look to sleep with them after one date, after no date at all. In fact, inviting them straight over, inviting themselves straight over. And I was saying, with that in mind, you teach people how to treat you. So if you do have a rule that you must be dating somebody for a month, 2 months, 3 months, you must be married. These are all boundaries that somebody can put in place, which will teach the man how to behave in order to get what he is looking for from that interaction. And some of the ladies at the table found that really unfair. They're like, no, that's ridiculous. Like, I don't have to make these rules or these boundaries. Like, men should treat me well regardless. And I was thinking, well, I really do think that if you have clear boundaries and you communicate those, then people will act in accordance with those. And if people don't, then you can walk away and you can leave it and make sure that those boundaries are enforced.
Yeah. Was there a specific question?
No, I was more just interested in, do you think that's something that people could look at in terms of assertiveness, in terms of being able to communicate those sort of boundaries that they have?
You know what, man? If a woman denies that how many sexual partners she's had doesn't play a role in how she's going to be perceived, she's just ignorant and foolish. And if a man believes that his level of success and ambition isn't going to impact how attractive he is, he's also foolish. We have different levels of gauging one's value. It's different. Men and women are different, and that's just the reality of it. And I believe everybody's absolutely within their right to have standards and to have expectations in a relationship. For one man, it might be very important to marry a virgin, let's say. For another man, it may kind of be important. For another one, it may have zero relevance whatsoever. Same thing for the other way around. There are women who want a man who will provide for her and look after her so she doesn't have to work, and he has to be financially stable. Some people might say she's a gold digger. I don't think she's a gold digger. I think she just has preferences.
And it's evolutionary biology as well, which encourages that too.
Absolutely. It's in her biology. But, you know, going down this subject, which is an interesting one as well, I do also believe that women invest in men, not the other way around. Men don't invest in women. What I mean by that is, when I met my wife, I was broke, to be honest, and I was wearing shorts in Bali, which I'm ashamed to say. I don't like shorts, man. And you can't wear pants in Bali. It's too damn hot. It's too humid. I was wearing shorts in Bali. That's when I met her, and I was pretty much broke. And she saw the way that I was communicating to her. She saw the way that I was carrying myself, the confidence that I had. And she essentially invested in me because she knew I was going places. I'm not saying that she dated me and ended up marrying me just because she knew I would do well, but it plays a big role. And that's something that I can't deny.
I'm in complete agreement, and I've had guests speak about this before as well. Women will invest in potential if you're showing the right behaviours that mean that in the future you will be likely to be a provider for the family. Whereas if you were in Bali taking drugs and partying and you were a bit rude to her, you're not exhibiting any of the behaviours of a man that will put together a successful business as you have done, that will build the lifestyle that you get to both benefit from, that will turn up to podcasts looking immaculate and communicating really well. You were on the path towards that. And I agree on the flip side, as you're indicating there, that men are less likely to look at a woman as a project or somebody that's going to increase in value. They're more likely to look at women and think, oh, right, okay, she's got a lot of red flags, I should back away from that. Well, I would hope they would.
Yeah. The only area that I think it's worth looking for potential in a woman is in terms of motherhood. And would she make a good wife, right? Would she make a good wife? Would she make a good mother? And that's where I would look for potential, absolutely. Especially if a man is wanting a traditional relationship, he wants to be a father, wants to have a family, that's the area where you should look for potential.
Absolutely. Sure. I'm naturally quite disagreeable. Mostly from a background doing politics at university, I would disagree with some of the leftist discussions during the time, and I was one of the few in the classroom that do that. Universities can be universities can be quite captured by socialism and communism. So I was quite often battling it out, but being assertive and disagreeable in a polite manner was something that I had to work really hard on. Particularly, I speak quite clearly for a Scottish person, but when a Scottish person's angry, it can seem really rude and intense. The R's get a lot harder, and it seems like an act of aggression. How would you recommend somebody is assertive but doesn't come across as aggressive or rude?
That is very simple to answer, actually, and I don't understand why most people don't think about this, actually, which is just be polite and respectful with your assertiveness. If you're assertive and you're polite at the same time, for example, Colin, I'd appreciate it if during the podcast we don't touch on this subject, and maybe after the podcast I say, Colin, I really enjoy the podcast, I appreciate it, thank you so much for having me, however, I didn't like it the way that you made this joke about me, it felt a little bit disrespectful. So in the future, is it alright if we don't do that? I'm still being assertive, but I'm being polite and respectful in the process. And you know what? People end up respecting you so much more when you speak your mind. One more point on this, which is important to think about, is you don't have to be assertive that often, man. People think, oh, I struggle being assertive. Like, how can I be assertive every day? It's not often that you have to make an assertive statement, to be honest. Unless you're working in a particular field and you're a leader, then yes, you do need to be assertive pretty often. But more often than not, these situations can be avoided anyway.
But I think it's important that the muscle is trained so that when it comes time to do the max lift, you're able to do it. Yeah,
absolutely. Everything's practiced for the big game. Everything. When I would start conversations here and there in university, practicing my communication skills, approaching the women, this and that, that led to the big game of me approaching my wife, of me pitching my services, of me growing my coaching business, of me doing cool podcasts like this. For me, this is the big game. And this is also practice for the next big game, which is, I don't know, speaking on stage, working with somebody, some bigger names, things like this. I believe communication is always practice for the next big thing, which is why, absolutely, you want to get in the reps. Something that I encourage everybody to do is get in a reference experience, meaning as much experience as you can. Go to a podcast, be a guest, start your own podcast, talk to strangers, step out of your comfort zone, make a video for social media. That's all reference experience, and that is all going to get you a step closer to being a great communicator.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the UK, we have Toastmasters. I assume you have something similar.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah. It's international.
And that's something that a lot of guests have spoken about and saying getting outside their comfort zone has really helped them to go and do that. And then they maybe volunteer to do a lunch and learn at work where all your colleagues are on either on Zoom or in person, and you're just continually, again, maybe a British term, but pushing the envelope further and further each time.
That's right.
And then you suddenly look around and you think, oh, I've actually built a lot of mastery here. And it happened not overnight, but bit by bit.
That's right. And stepping out of your comfort zone consistently is absolutely the way to do that. You do it little by little, day by day. And then I would say a couple of times a year, at least a couple of times a year, make big decisions that are out of your comfort zone. For example, we moved into a house recently rather than an apartment. We were living in apartments the whole time. And moving into the house was a big financial leap. But we thought, you know what? Let's step out of our comfort zone. Let's take that bigger leap, and that's going to help us grow. And that's what we do. That's a macro example. A micro example would be, you know what? I'm used to lifting this amount of weight every day in the gym. Let me add on another 5 kilos. Or even 2.5.
I love how actionable, for guys that listen to this that are into their building their body, it always comes back to reps, increasing the intensity, maybe upping the volume a little bit, making sure you recover, and then go again. And you can use it in any environment.
Yeah. And another interesting one, if a lot of your audience tends to train, is if you want to improve your social confidence, go train at a different gym one day and just walk around the gym like you own it. Walk around the gym like it's your gym, and not in an arrogant way, but just walk with confidence and lift your weights. That'll boost your confidence as well.
How important is body language when it comes to communication?
It's extremely important. I would say in communication, it's the second most important thing, because when you're communicating, and the first one is your state, your energetic state, which we touched on a little bit, but body language is extremely important. If I'm sitting like this the whole interview, nobody's going to take me seriously.
Arms crossed, closed off. Yeah. Almost negative is the immediate feeling that I get.
Yeah, exactly. Another one is, it can be subtle, man. Like, if I'm talking like this to you,
okay,
it can make it look like I'm hiding something. When you cover your mouth, it makes it look like you're hiding something.
Maybe you're being dishonest with me. Maybe you're lying.
Yeah, maybe. To be honest, that's not a sign of lying when you cover your mouth. It isn't, but it can make people feel like you're lying.
Oh, even worse, you're not lying, but people think you are.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. When you cover your mouth, people assume, they become suspicious. They assume that you're lying or something, or you're hiding something, which is kind of lying. But it's usually just a sign of nervousness and not being totally comfortable opening up.
I talk a lot with my hands. I watch you do it really well too, and a lot of it comes naturally to me now.
Yeah,
it wasn't always this way. What would be your recommendation for somebody that maybe wants to start doing that more?
I just had a client call before this podcast actually, and I said to him I was teaching him how to be more charismatic. And when he speaks, he tends to be a little bit monotoned with no real expression in his face, doesn't use his hands at all. And I told him, I said, brother, it's very robotic. In fact, even AI these days, if you talk to ChatGPT, there's more emotion there these days than most people. I said, use your facial expressions and use your hand gestures. Because when you do that, people are more engaged and they actually pay more attention because now they're not just listening, they're also watching you. I'm exaggerating a little bit right now, but generally when you make points like that, it's very helpful.
I really like that. And the fact you use the word exaggerating is something that I think is great, because whenever we want to introduce a new behavior, it's great to let the pendulum swing to the extreme end and practice what it feels like at that, because you're probably not going to be confident enough yet to do it at that extreme in public, but practicing it at the extreme end in private means that you'll probably show up somewhere in between the two in public the first few times. And one of the P's that I talk about with my sales guys is personality. And the big thing that we do is we do an exercise where I want you to pitch me this product or service, but do it mute and pitch me with your facial expressions and your hands. And I'm like, right, cool, let's turn the sound back on. And it's always so much better, because people always have a state and a robotic state that they go back into, or they do the opposite and they talk at a million miles an hour like they've had more caffeine than I've had today, and they go
yeah, got it. It's so true. It's interesting. However, with exaggerating it, I would say that when I say exaggerate your gestures and your facial expressions, do that in public as well. You know why? Wow. Because it doesn't look exaggerated to people. It just feels exaggerated to you. For example, if I tell a client, exaggerate your facial expressions and your gestures, this is generally what they look like this. Because it's so far out of their comfort zone, they think this is overly exaggerated, when in reality it isn't. In reality, it just looks charismatic. It's never as bad as they think it is.
That's right. It's funny, I have particular hand gestures and things that I do lots of. And the YouTube channel's growing a lot slower than the audio platforms, but I've started putting the video on Spotify. It's enabled for that now.
Yeah, nice.
And one of my questions for my last solo podcast, I do a Q&A every 10 episodes, episode 300, was, I'm watching now on YouTube and I see you do a lot of hand gestures. Was that natural or is that learned? And what do some of them mean? And for example, I said, Shako, welcome to the show. And I put my hands wide and I brought it in towards me. And that happens on autopilot now, autopilot in a good way.
Yep.
Because I'm ingratiating and I'm welcoming you, and it adds depth to what I've said, not just the words themselves.
Absolutely. It becomes second nature. It's like anything. When you improve your communication skills, you start walking with better body language is a good example, because if you are used to having slouched body language and very closed off, if you start rolling your shoulders back, your chest is out, you're breathing deep into your diaphragm, at first, it might feel a little bit awkward. It might even feel forced and fake. But if you just do that, even for a week, it'll start to become your new norm. And then it becomes totally second nature.
I'm a big believer in raising our floor rather than always pushing our ceiling. So if we can raise the floor of our body language to a really good level, who knows what the ceiling could be in the future, but we just have a minimum level that we always operate at, where we're expressive, we're confident, and people feel that level of connection with us. And I know you're a really big believer in energy, as you were speaking about. Body language for me is always an indicator that somebody's engaged. And when I watch you communicate, I watch your hands move, and I'm fascinated by the quality that you execute at. I'm just thinking the full time, that is practice. So now you are unconsciously competent with your body language.
Yeah, that's right. That's what happens. And I genuinely believe that there's no limit to how far you can take your communication skills. You can become more and more and more charismatic. And I know this because I track my own progress. I look at content that I made 6 months ago. I look at content I made a year ago, 5 years ago. It's wildly different, man. I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. I'm saying that because anybody can do it. I see my clients do it all the time. If somebody wants to create content, for example, any of your listeners, start recording content and analyzing your content. Watch it back. I'm sure you do this sometimes. Like, you either listen to or watch your podcast and you say to yourself, I could have done that better. Or maybe I shouldn't interrupt at this point next time. Or maybe that question was really, really good. I'll use that again. And when you reflect on your communication skills more and more, Sky's the limit, man.
It's game tape. Even now, I listen back every single Sunday when I go for a walk in the morning, and I listen for filler words that I've used, which I managed to cut out massively,
Nice.
to the extent that it's almost non-existent. Words that I've overused. So
That's a big one.
yeah, I was. So a lot of people say absolutely. In Scotland, we say 100% all the time.
Yeah.
One of the I don't get nervous before interviews. I get excited because I reframe the language.
Nice.
But I hosted Daniel Priestley November 23 when I was in Dubai. Really excited. The size of the show at the time, it was like a great capture, and I knew it was going to add tremendous value. I listened back, and there wasn't filler words, but I said fascinating 7-8 times. Now across an hour, that is quite a lot of times to say a word that's acknowledging what point somebody's made.
Yeah.
And that was my version of a nervous tick. Now, if that's the standard I'm holding myself to, that's great. But it was something that I noticed, and I'm sure people will notice whether it's like, or something else. When you become aware of those, awareness is the first point.
Yeah.
And then replacing it with something else. More often than not, for me, it's breathing. But what would you recommend?
Awareness is absolutely the first point. Well said. In order to overcome a filler word or a word that you're constantly using, it is actually breathing. It's breathing and pausing. I find that most people don't pause enough. They just speak and speak and speak, and they don't allow themselves a moment to think about what they just said.
That's the best example. I love that, because in the pause, I was just wrapped in your words, and everyone listening, especially if they're listening at 1x speed, not 1.5x, like I listen to a lot of podcasts, they will have been waiting for Shako to deliver the value. And because of your pause, the anticipation built, and then they went, wow, you have to pause, and people will listen more to what comes after it.
And people will wait. People are, the fear that we have in our minds is, oh shit, everybody's waiting for me to talk. As if we're thinking, why hasn't he spoken yet? It's been 0.5 seconds. It's like, brother, be patient with yourself. People will be. In fact, when you speak less and you speak with more pauses, people are more likely to pay even more attention and value your words more. I've experimented with this with content as well, Colin. I've recorded content which is very fast paced, very virally. Improve your communication skills like this. A, B, and Z. A, B, and Z. It doesn't even work for me, brother. And it doesn't do that well. But then when I turn the camera on and I don't script anything and I say, hey guys, today we're going to talk about how to overcome nervousness in group settings. Here's what to do. And I'm just completely natural. That always does way, way better. My most viral videos have been completely natural.
I love your reels for starters, but one, it fits your style, and two, it leans into what you understand about communication too.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Really, really cool. One of the biggest fears for people in communication, from my perspective, is awkward small talk. What tools would you equip them with to overcome that?
So people tend to have a bad relationship with small talk because they think it's boring. My response to that is, small talk isn't boring. You're boring. Small talk is the only way you can get any conversation to a deeper place anyway. You think you can meet somebody for the first time at a dinner party and ask them about their childhood trauma, or ask them about the biggest goals in life? It's like, sure, you can get to that point pretty quickly, but initially you need to say, lovely to meet you. What brings you to the dinner? How do you know our host? How long have you been in Dubai? This gives you context. It's necessary. And it's not the small talk itself that's going to make you charismatic. I never tell my clients what to say specifically, by the way. Never. We don't have canned lines. What will make you great at small talk is the energy that you're emitting. If I talk to you about coffee, about this podcast studio, about living in Dubai, it has nothing to do with my words. It's my enthusiasm in hearing about your thoughts. What is that? What watch is that you're wearing? Is that the mother of pearl? Is it actually?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful one. It's one of a kind. I love these watches. Are you into watches?
Ish, since I got this.
Yeah? What made you get that?
I hit a particular milestone in my day job of
Amazing.
a particular figure that I earned through my commission, and I decided I would take the jump.
Good on you, man. That's fantastic. When you add a timestamp on a purchase like that, it makes it more sentimental, doesn't it?
That's right.
How did it feel when you bought it?
Really good, because I felt like I'd worked from it, and I didn't hedonically adapt to the watch, to the fact that I love the watch still now. And I I love your watch as well, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But I felt every time I put it on, I still feel good.
Wow.
And people give you compliments, and that's not the be all and the end all, but it's nice when somebody notices it, whereas you could maybe spend 3, 4, 5x on a watch, and people will be like, oh, well, it's just another whatever watch it is.
Absolutely. So that was an example of small talk. You see what I did there, right? I just became curious about you and became enthusiastic, and I encouraged you to unpack what you were saying. What made you get it? Oh, cool. What was the milestone? That's incredible. How did you feel when you hit the milestone? And that ends up getting you talking and talking. And that is how you can have small talk very easily. Cold read people. Notice something about what somebody's wearing, what book they're reading, even their style, and make a comment. Once I said to a guy at a cafe sitting next to me, he was wearing a purple suit in Dubai. I said, I gotta say, my friend, you are looking absolutely dapper. You're putting us all to shame. And then he asked me to sit down next to him and have a coffee. And he gave me his number and we started chatting. He ended up being a local, actually. So cold read somebody, make an assumption, and then ask open-ended questions. That's the easiest way into small talk. And be enthusiastic in your energy as well.
Yeah, that was incredible, and I love that little role play for people to take away. I've had so much fun today's conversation, Shako. I would love to have you on the show again when I'm back November, December time. I'm sure the listeners will be clamoring for it as well. But I wanted to ask you, I know that you're in your early 30s. You recently made the big move to come to Dubai. Your business is in a phenomenal spot. By the time you turn 40, what would success look like for you?
Oh man, that's a great question. Nobody's asked me that. Success for me by 40 would be having a big family with my beautiful wife. It would be having 2 houses, one in Dubai and one somewhere else, somewhere very green. And it would be just having a ton of fun with my family, my parents, taking them on frequent holidays, my brothers, my in-laws, my brother-in-law, and just very family-oriented goals, man. Having a lot of kids, being incredibly fit as well, and having a business that's running on autopilot with me working with a select few clients, it's definitely heading in that direction even now. So I don't think we'll need 10 years to hit that, but by 40, that would be ideal.
Beautiful goals.
Thank you for asking, man.
Well, and we're on the way there. Well, I knew today was going to be really practical from a communication standpoint, but we spent a lot of time during today's conversation talking about purpose and direction and not living on autopilot, and setting goals and stretching goals. So I was keen to wrap up and understand what that goal might look like for you.
Yeah, there we go.
Really cool. Final question, where should listeners head towards to continue the conversation?
To find me?
Yeah.
I mean, they can find me on Instagram if they mention that they came from this podcast, then Cambros.
That's right.
Yes, if they tell me that they came from Cambros, we'll sort them out on Instagram, Shako Lokman. I'm sure you're going to add my handle in the
I'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah, but Instagram would be the best spot for
Beautiful stuff. Thank you to you, Shako, and thank you to the listener. I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.